Have you ever been judged unfairly? Pushed aside, dismissed, or made to feel small by someone drunk on a tiny sliver of power? We've all been there. But what happens when the person being dismissed holds the kind of power they can't even comprehend? What happens when a condescending smirk and a wave of a hand doesn't just ruin someone's day, but triggers an earthquake in the corporate world? This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about a reckoning. It's the story of how one woman, denied her rightful place in a priority line, decided that the only solution was to buy the entire counter, the plane, and the company that came with it. Stay tuned, because the karma in this story is served ice cold. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was a familiar symphony of chaos for Dr. Imani Jordan. It was a blend of rolling suitcase wheels, anxious last calls for boarding, and the multilingual chatter of 1,000 different journeys converging in one place. For Imani, it was just background noise. Her focus was sharp, honed by years of navigating boardrooms where the stakes were measured in billions. Today, the stake was a crucial meeting in Zurich, the final handshake on a merger that would redefine her company, Nexus Innovations, as the undisputed leader in AI-driven logistics. Dressed in a tailored charcoal pantsuit that whispered expense rather than shouted it, and carrying a simple but elegant leather briefcase, Imani approached the Global Wings Airline's first-class check-in counter. Her ticket, purchased for a staggering $11,400, was a necessary tool, a guarantee of comfort, quiet, and Wi-Fi access that would allow her to work uninterrupted across the Atlantic. The priority lane, marked with a plush red rope and a gleaming silver sign, was manned by a woman whose name tag read Brenda. Brenda Grisham had a face set in a permanent state of mild disapproval, as if every passenger was a personal inconvenience. She was currently engaged in a loud saccharine phone call, one hand gesturing dismissively at the growing line. "Oh, I know, honey. He said what?" "No, he did not." "The absolute nerve!" she cackled, ignoring Imani completely. Imani waited patiently for a full minute before clearing her throat softly. "Excuse me?" Brenda's eyes flickered over, scanning Imani from her sensible shoes to her professionally styled hair. It was a look Imani knew well, the kind of appraisal that wasn't about seeing a person, but about placing them into a preconceived box, a slow, dismissive up and down that concluded Imani did not belong in this line. Brenda held up a single, perfectly manicured finger, signaling for Imani to wait, and turned back to her call. "Listen, Margie, I gotta go. Another one's trying her luck. Talk later." She slammed the phone down and offered a tight, insincere smile. "Economy check-in is over there, ma'am," she said, pointing with her pen to the serpentine queue snaking across the terminal. Imani blinked, maintaining her composure. "I believe I'm in the correct line. I'm flying first class to Zurich." Brenda let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like cracking ice. "Right. First class. Ticket, please." Her tone was laden with disbelief, as if Imani had just claimed to be flying to the moon. Imani slid her passport and phone, displaying the QR code for her ticket, across the counter. Brenda picked up the passport, flipping it open with a snap, then glanced at the phone with a theatrical squint. She tapped a few keys on her terminal, her expression souring further. Brenda grunted, chewing on the inside of her cheek. "System's not finding a first-class booking for Imani Jordan." She said the name slowly, as if it were a foreign concept. "I do see a reservation for you, but it's for a middle seat in economy. Looks like there might have been a downgrade." The word hung in the air, a deliberate insult. Imani's mind raced. A downgrade? She had received no notification. Her booking confirmation, still pristine in her email, clearly stated First Class, Suite 1A. "That's impossible," Imani stated, her voice calm but firm. "Could you please check again? Perhaps under the confirmation number." "I did check, ma'am," Brenda replied, her voice rising in practiced condescension. "The system is what the system is. If you want to take the economy seat, you need to go to that line. Otherwise, you'll have to call customer service to sort out your issue." She practically spat the last word. The implication was clear. You couldn't possibly afford this ticket, so you must have tried to scam your way in, and the computer caught you. Other passengers in the priority line were beginning to stare. A man in a flashy suit behind Imani sighed impatiently. The humiliation was a hot coal in Imani's stomach. "I'm not moving lines," Imani said, her voice dropping to a quiet, dangerous level. "I paid for a service, and I expect to receive it. I'd like to speak to your manager." This was the magic phrase that usually resolved such situations, but Brenda was emboldened by her audience. "Robert," she called out, a smirk playing on her lips. "Manager to first class, please." Robert Miller was a man who seemed to be perpetually wilting inside his ill-fitting uniform. He scurried over, his face a mask of practiced concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Is there a problem here, Brenda?" "This lady," Brenda began, gesturing towards Imani, "is insisting she has a first-class ticket, but the system shows her in economy. I've explained the situation, but she's refusing to move and is holding up the line." Robert gave Imani a cursory glance, his expression already siding with his employee. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but our computer systems are quite definitive. If there's a discrepancy, it's something you'll have to take up with corporate. For now, Brenda is right. To keep things moving, we have to ask you to step aside. We can try to rebook you." "I don't want to be rebooked," Imani interrupted, her patience evaporating. She pulled out her phone again, showing him the confirmation email from Global Wings itself, time-stamped, with the seat number and price paid in clear, bold text. "This is a legally binding contract. Your airline confirmed this booking and accepted my payment. Your internal system error is not my problem." Robert Miller looked from the phone to his screen, his brow furrowed. He saw the proof, but challenging Brenda and the system was clearly beyond his managerial courage. It was easier to remove the source of the conflict. "I see that, ma'am. But I can't override what the terminal says," he said, his voice taking on a patronizing, placating tone. "I'm sure it's frustrating. Why don't we get you a voucher for a complimentary beverage for your troubles, and we'll get you checked in for your economy seat?" A beverage voucher for an $11,400 ticket. The insult was so profound, so dismissive, that Imani felt a strange, cold clarity descend upon her. The anger was still there, but it was being channeled, refined, and forged into something else entirely, something sharp and potent. "So to be clear," Imani said, her voice now devoid of all emotion, "you are the manager on duty. You see the proof of purchase, you see my passport, and your final decision is to refuse me service based on a computer error you are unwilling to investigate, and to offer me a soda for my troubles." "I'm just trying to follow procedure, ma'am," Robert said weakly, starting to sweat under the intensity of her gaze. "I see," Imani said. She took a step back from the counter. She looked at Brenda, who was now smiling triumphantly. She looked at Robert, a man defined by his lack of a spine. And she looked at the Global Wings logo on the wall behind them, a symbol of systemic failure, of prejudice wrapped in the guise of procedure. She turned without another word and walked away, not towards the economy line, but towards the nearest quiet corner of the terminal. She didn't take the economy seat. She pulled out her phone and made a different booking on a rival airline, a last-minute seat that cost a fortune but would get her to Zurich. As she sat in the lounge of the other airline, the humiliation cooled into a diamond-hard resolve. They hadn't just denied her a seat. They had made a judgment. They had assessed her worth based on their own narrow, ugly biases and found her lacking. Brenda and Robert thought they had won. They thought they had put another entitled person in her place. They had no idea that they hadn't just created a customer complaint, they had created an enemy. And Dr. Imani Jordan was not the kind of enemy anyone could afford to make. The merger in Zurich was important, but a new, more personal project had just moved to the very top of her agenda. The flight to Zurich on Swiss Air was everything her Global Wings experience was not: seamless, respectful, and efficient. Tucked away in her private suite, cruising at 38,000 feet, Imani didn't sleep. The fury that had ignited within her at JFK had not dissipated. It had transformed. It was no longer a hot, emotional blaze, but a cold, focused energy that hummed with purpose. She wasn't just a slighted customer. She was a strategist, and the problem at Gate B24 was no longer a personal insult, but a systemic weakness to be analyzed and exploited. She opened her laptop, the glow illuminating her determined face in the darkened cabin. Instead of reviewing the final details for the Zurich merger, she opened a secure channel to her inner circle. Her first call was to David Chen, her chief financial officer. David was a prodigy, a numbers wizard who could dissect a company's balance sheet and find its hidden weaknesses in minutes. The call connected almost instantly. Imani, it's 3 a.m. in New York. Is everything all right? Is the merger in jeopardy? David's voice was sharp with concern. The merger is fine, David. I'm on my way, she reassured him. I need you to do something for me. I need a deep dive on an airline. Global Wings. There was a pause. Global Wings, David repeated, confused. The one with the aging fleet and the plummeting stock? I thought we agreed they were a poor investment risk for our logistics portfolio last year. That was last year, Imani said, a hint of steel in her tone. I'm not interested in them for our portfolio. This is for me. I want to know everything. Their debt-to-equity ratio, their major shareholders, their market capitalization, their vulnerabilities. I want to know if they're ripe for a hostile takeover, or at the very least, a significant, board-shaking acquisition. I want it all, and I want it by the time I land in Zurich in 6 hours. David was silent for a moment, processing the unusual and urgent request. He was smart enough to know this wasn't just a whim. Is this personal, Imani? Let's just say their customer service model has revealed a significant market opportunity, she replied cryptically. Consider it a case study in corporate accountability. Understood, David said, his voice already shifting into work mode. Keyboards clicked in the background. I'll get the team on it. You'll have a full preliminary report before you touch down. Her next call was to Sophia Knight, her razor-sharp general counsel, a woman who had navigated some of the most complex corporate legal battles in the country. Sophia, Imani began without preamble, I need you to start preparing the groundwork for a massive stock acquisition. Target company is Global Wings Airlines, NYSE ticker GWA. Global Wings? Sophia's voice was laced with professional skepticism. Their board is notoriously insular. Old boys club. They'll fight any outside influence tooth and nail. Good, Imani said. I want them to fight. I need you to identify the largest institutional investors. Find the disgruntled ones, the pension funds tired of seeing their returns flatline. I need to know the threshold for demanding a seat on the board and what it would take to force a shareholder vote on new management. I need to know how quickly we can legally and quietly start buying up their stock on the open market without triggering alarms. This sounds aggressive, Imani. Are you sure you want to poke this bear? Imani looked out the window at the endless blanket of clouds below. Sophia, a bear just tried to maul me at JFK. I have no intention of just poking it. I'm going to buy its cave, its stream, and the whole forest it lives in. I want to be in a position to make a definitive move within 24 hours of my return to New York. 24 hours, Sophia gasped. That's unprecedented. Nexus Innovations was built on the unprecedented, Sophia. Make it happen. After the calls, Imani leaned back, the hum of the engines a comforting drone. The humiliation she felt earlier was now a distant echo, replaced by the thrill of the hunt. Brenda Grisham and Robert Miller thought they were gatekeepers, wielding their tiny scrap of power. They had no concept of real power. Real power wasn't raising your voice at a check-in counter. Real power was the silent, invisible movement of capital. It was the ability to rewrite the rules of the game, while the other players didn't even know a new game had begun. They had judged her by her appearance, assuming she was powerless. They had made a critical business error. They had failed to properly assess the person standing in front of them. In Imani's world of logistics and data analysis, such a failure in assessment was catastrophic, and the consequences, she decided, should be equally so. For the remainder of the flight, she didn't think about Brenda's smirk or Robert's weakness. She thought about flight patterns, fuel costs, union contracts, and shareholder dissatisfaction. She dissected Global Wings not as a victim, but as a predator. The Zurich merger was now just the appetizer. Her main course would be waiting for her back in New York. Imani's meeting in Zurich was a masterclass in focus. She strode into the high-rise office of the Swiss tech conglomerate, shook hands, and for 6 straight hours, she was purely Dr. Imani Jordan, CEO of Nexus Innovations. She negotiated terms, debated clauses, and secured the multi-billion-dollar merger with the cool precision of a surgeon. Her counterparts saw only a brilliant, unshakable executive at the top of her game. None of them could have guessed that a parallel, far more audacious plan was unfolding in real time on the other side of the world. While she was finalizing the deal, her phone vibrated silently on the table with encrypted messages. From David Chen, CFO. Initial report sent. It's worse than we thought, Imani. They're bleeding cash, heavily over-leveraged on fleet modernization they can't afford. Stock is undervalued by at least 15%. Multiple pension funds are quietly looking for an exit strategy. They're a house of cards in a hurricane. From Sophia Knight, legal. Found our entry point. The Harrington Pension Group holds a 7% stake, and they are furious with current management under CEO Arthur Finch. They've been trying to get a board seat for a year. If we can acquire their block and add to it, we can force an emergency shareholder meeting. The bylaws are surprisingly weak on anti-takeover provisions. It's an oversight from a more complacent era. Imani absorbed the information without breaking eye contact with the Swiss CEO across the table. A small, grim smile touched her lips as she signed the final document. The merger was done. Phase 1 of her day was complete. On the flight back to New York that evening, aboard her own company's private Gulfstream G700, a luxury she rarely used but deemed necessary for this occasion, Imani convened a virtual war room. David and Sophia appeared on the large screen in the cabin, their faces lit by their monitors, looking tired but energized. "All right," Imani began, her voice crisp. "Walk me through it." David went first, pulling up charts and graphs that painted a grim picture of Global Wings. Their CEO, Arthur Finch, is an old-school airline man. He's been focused on vanity projects, plush new rebrands for first-class lounges that serve a fraction of their customers, while ignoring the core issues. Their fuel hedging strategy is a disaster. Their union negotiations are perpetually stalled, and their customer satisfaction ratings are in the toilet. They are a legacy carrier acting like they still have a monopoly, and the market is punishing them for it. In short, Imani summarized, they are arrogant, inefficient, and vulnerable. Exactly, David confirmed. A predator could easily come in and strip them for parts, but a strategist could take the whole thing and rebuild it from the ground up. Their roots are still valuable. Their gate slots at major hubs like JFK are their single greatest asset. Sophia chimed in. And we have the key to the gate. I've spoken with the fund manager at Harrington. He's ready to sell their entire 7% stake in a block trade the second the market opens. He hates Finch more than he loves his money. On top of that, I've identified 3 other smaller funds who will follow Harrington's lead. That gets us to 12% almost instantly. Imani leaned forward. That's not enough. A 12% stake gets us a voice. I don't want a voice. I want a megaphone. I want control. That's the next phase, David said, pulling up another screen. For the past 8 hours, we've been using 3 separate shell corporations, funneling Nexus funds to quietly buy up GWA stock on the open market. Every time a small investor sold, we bought. We kept the purchases small and spread them out to avoid triggering any SEC red flags for unusual activity. As of an hour ago, we have discreetly acquired an additional 9%. Imani did the math in her head. 12% plus 9% was 21%, a formidable block. It's a great start, she said, but Finch and his board can still circle the wagons. They'll try to paint us as corporate raiders. We need to make a move so big, so decisive, that it decapitates their leadership before they can even mount a defense. David, what's the airline's total market capitalization? As of market close today, a shockingly low $4.3 billion, David replied. And what is Nexus's liquid cash reserve post-merger? David took a deep breath. Approximately $2.8 billion, not including credit lines. A silence fell over the virtual meeting. The number was staggering. Sophia's eyes widened. She knew what Imani was thinking. Imani, you're not suggesting, Sophia started. I am, Imani confirmed, her voice ringing with absolute authority. I don't just want a seat at their table. I want the whole table. I want to be the new owner. Sophia, what's the legal minimum for a tender offer to be taken seriously? A significant premium over market value. 20 to 25% would be standard. No, Imani cut her off. I don't want a negotiation. I want a surrender. David, prepare a cash offer to purchase an additional 30% of Global Wings stock at $25 per share. That's a 40% premium over today's closing price. The offer goes live to all shareholders tomorrow morning, 1 minute after the opening bell. It will be an offer so good, so overwhelmingly generous, that any shareholder who refuses it would be a fool, and any board that advises against it would be violating their fiduciary duty. They'll be legally obligated to sell to me. The sheer audacity of the plan was breathtaking. It was a corporate blitzkrieg. By the time Arthur Finch and his board of directors arrived at work, they wouldn't be facing a disgruntled shareholder. They'd be facing their new boss. It's done, David said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. The orders are staged. Sophia, draft the press release, Imani commanded. Effective immediately upon the completion of the tender offer, Nexus Innovations will hold a 51% controlling stake in Global Wings Airlines. Dr. Imani Jordan will assume the role of interim chairwoman of the board. A full strategic review of all operations and personnel, from the C-suite to the check-in counter, will begin immediately. She paused, letting the last words hang in the air. Make sure to use that exact phrasing. From the C-suite to the check-in counter. As the Gulf Stream began its descent into New York, the sun was just beginning to rise, painting the horizon in hues of orange and purple. It was the dawn of a new day. For Arthur Finch, for Robert Miller, and for a particularly condescending check-in agent named Brenda Grisham, it was the dawn of a reckoning they never saw coming. The opening bell of the New York Stock Exchange rang at 9:30 a.m. with its usual clamor. But within 60 seconds, a tsunami hit the trading floor, and its epicenter was the ticker symbol GWA. The press release, issued by Nexus Innovations and distributed by every major financial newswire, landed like a bomb. The headline was blunt, brutal, and electrifying. Tech giant Nexus Innovations launches $1.6 billion hostile takeover of Global Wings Airlines. The details were even more shocking. A cash tender offer at a 40% premium. The acquisition of a massive 21% stake overnight. And the clear stated intention of its CEO, Dr. Imani Jordan, to take immediate and decisive control. Arthur Finch, the longtime CEO of Global Wings, was lifting a cup of coffee to his lips in his sprawling corner office overlooking the city when his phone began to scream with alerts. He glanced at it, saw the headline from the Wall Street Journal, and choked, spraying hot coffee across a stack of quarterly reports. He stared at the screen, his face draining of color. Hostile takeover? Nexus Innovations? Imani Jordan? He'd barely heard of her. His office door burst open, and his CFO, a perpetually panicked man named Gerald, rushed in, his tie askew. "Arthur, have you seen this? The stock just halted trading. It jumped 38% in the first minute before they shut it down. Our phones are on fire. What the hell is happening?" "I don't know," Finch roared, slamming his fist on his mahogany desk. "Get the board on a conference call now. Get our lawyers. Get me everything you can on this Imani Jordan. Who is she? Why is she doing this?" The business world was in a frenzy. On networks like CNBC, commentators were scrambling. "This is one of the most audacious corporate raids we've seen in years," one analyst exclaimed. "Global Wings has been a sleeping dog, but nobody expected a T-Rex to come along and swallow it whole. Imani Jordan, for those who don't know her, isn't your typical corporate raider. She builds things. Nexus Innovations has revolutionized the logistics industry. For her to make a move this aggressive, this personal, it suggests she sees something no one else does." By 10 a.m., the tender offer was a foregone conclusion. Shareholders, who had watched their investment in GWA stagnate for years, were stampeding to accept the generous cash offer. Pension fund managers were hailing Imani Jordan as a savior. The Harrington Pension Group, the first to sell, issued a public statement praising the move as a necessary and bold step to unlock the true value of Global Wings and replace an entrenched, underperforming management. The statement was a dagger in Arthur Finch's back. His support was evaporating in real time. Inside the Global Wings war room, the atmosphere was one of pure panic. Finch, a man used to the slow, clubby pace of the airline industry, was completely outmaneuvered. He and his board had spent years fending off challenges through backroom deals and corporate politicking. They had no defense against a blitzkrieg of overwhelming capital. "What are our options?" Finch demanded of his legal team. The lead counsel, a grim-faced lawyer from a top firm, shook his head. "Legally? Very few. The offer is financially sound and well above market value. If the board advises shareholders to reject it, we could be sued for breaching our fiduciary duty. There's no poison pill provision in the bylaws strong enough to stop this. She's been planning this. She found every loophole." "So we just roll over?" Finch bellowed, his face turning a deep shade of crimson. "We just hand her the keys?" Your shareholders are already doing that for you, Arthur, Gerald, the CFO, said softly, looking at the trading data. The acceptance rate on the tender offer is already projected to be over 90%. By market close today, Dr. Imani Jordan will be the majority owner of this airline. The finality of the statement sucked the air out of the room. Arthur Finch, the titan of the airline industry, a man who had graced the covers of business magazines, had been dethroned, and he still didn't even know why. He slumped into his chair, the fight gone from his eyes. He saw his legacy, his career, his identity, all being stripped away by a woman he'd never even met. Meanwhile, in her own serene, minimalist office at Nexus Tower, Imani Jordan watched the news reports with a calm, detached interest. There was no celebration, no gloating. This was simply the logical execution of a plan. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Sophia. "It's done. We have 51.7%. Congratulations, Madam Chairwoman." Imani replied with a single word. "Good." She then placed a call to her executive assistant. "Please schedule a meeting for me tomorrow at 11 Celsius a.m. Location, JFK Terminal 4. I want to meet the new CEO of Global Wings there. Oh, and please extend an invitation to the on-site manager for the first-class check-in counters. I believe his name is Robert Miller. Tell him his attendance is not optional." The shockwave had hit Wall Street. The next tremor was scheduled for a very specific spot at John F. Kennedy International Airport, and it was going to be far more personal. The next morning, an entirely new kind of tension crackled in the air at the Global Wings first-class check-in area. The usual flow of wealthy travelers was disrupted by a nervous energy emanating from the staff. Whispers flew between agents. The CEO, Arthur Finch, was coming, not for an inspection, but to meet the new owner, the mysterious tech billionaire who had seized control of their company in a single day. Robert Miller, the terminal manager, was a wreck. He had been patting his forehead with a handkerchief for an hour, his uniform collar feeling like a noose. He had been personally summoned. He didn't know why, but the specificity of the request filled him with a cold dread. Brenda Grisham, however, was in her element. She saw the corporate shake-up as a distant storm, irrelevant to her little kingdom at the counter. She was, in fact, preening. The CEO was coming here. She adjusted her scarf and practiced her most professional-looking smile, hoping to catch his eye, and maybe, just maybe, get noticed for her diligent gatekeeping. At exactly 11 a.m., a procession appeared at the end of the terminal. In the lead was Arthur Finch, his face pale and drawn, looking like a man walking to his own execution. Beside him, flanked by two quiet but imposing assistants, was Dr. Imani Jordan. She wore a sharp, navy blue dress, her expression unreadable. A small, discreet contingent of reporters, tipped off by Imani's PR team, followed at a respectful distance, cameras at the ready. The group stopped directly in front of Gate B24, Brenda's counter. Brenda's professional smile faltered. She looked at Imani, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face, followed by confusion. She remembered the woman from 2 days ago, the one she'd sent to the economy line. What is she doing here with Mr. Finch? Robert Miller saw her too, and his blood ran cold. The dread in his stomach crystallized into pure, gut-wrenching panic. It couldn't be. It was a coincidence. It had to be. Arthur Finch, acting on instructions he had received 10 minutes prior, cleared his throat. "Brenda, Robert," he said, his voice strained. "I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Imani Jordan. As of yesterday, Dr. Jordan is the new majority shareholder and chairwoman of the board of Global Wings Airlines." The world seemed to tilt on its axis for Brenda Grisham. The condescending smirk froze, then melted from her face, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of utter disbelief. Her eyes darted from Imani's calm, powerful face to Finch's defeated one. The woman she had dismissed, humiliated, and accused of trying to scam her way into first class, now owned the entire airline. Every plane, every gate, every uniform. Her. Robert Miller felt a wave of nausea. The memory of him offering a complimentary beverage voucher to this woman flashed in his mind. He had stood there, a petty bureaucrat, and had sided with procedure over principle, with condescension over customer service. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had committed career suicide. Imani stepped forward, her gaze locking onto Brenda. Her voice was quiet, yet it carried across the suddenly silent terminal. The reporter's cameras zoomed in. "Hello, Brenda," Imani said, her tone level. "We've met before. I was here 2 days ago. I had a first-class ticket to Zurich, Suite 1A. You told me there was a system error, and that my ticket was for a middle seat in economy." Brenda's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Her face was a mask of dawning horror. Imani then turned her gaze to Robert. "And you, Mr. Miller, you were the manager on duty. You upheld Brenda's decision even after I presented proof of purchase. You told me you had to follow procedure." Robert looked like he was about to faint. Dr. Jordan, I didn't realize," he stammered. "That is precisely the problem," Imani said, her voice cutting through his pathetic excuses. "You didn't realize. It is not a customer's job to be realized as important. It is your job, your procedure, to treat every single customer with a baseline of dignity and respect. You failed. Brenda failed. This entire counter, this entire corporate culture has failed." She took a step closer to the counter, the same counter where she had been so casually dismissed. "When I stood here 2 days ago, I was just a customer, a contract holder. But you didn't see me as that. You saw something else, and you made a judgment. Your judgment was poor. It was a bad business decision." She ran a hand along the polished marble of the counter. "So I made a good business decision. My first act as chairwoman is to announce a complete overhaul of customer-facing operations. This counter," she said, tapping it for emphasis, "is the symbol of the old way of doing things. Inefficient, prejudiced, unaccountable. As of this moment, it is closed." She turned to Arthur Finch. "Mr. Finch, please have your staff clear the area. I have a team from Nexus arriving this afternoon to begin a full technological and procedural audit. We will start here." Then her eyes, cold as chips of obsidian, found Brenda and Robert again. They were frozen, paralyzed by the sheer scale of their blunder. "You two are not fired," Imani said, and for a fleeting, insane moment, they felt a sliver of hope. The hope was immediately crushed. Firing you would be too easy. It would be a release. Instead, you are both being reassigned. You will be the inaugural participants in the new Global Wings Dignity and Excellence program, a mandatory, top-to-bottom re-education initiative I am personally overseeing. Your first assignment will be to write a detailed 10,000-word report on the cascading financial and operational consequences of a single negative customer interaction. You can use your own as the case study. The cameras flashed, capturing the exquisite, perfectly calibrated karma of the moment. It wasn't loud, screaming revenge. It was a cold, corporate, and utterly devastating dismantling of two people who had mistaken their tiny bit of authority for genuine power. They hadn't just lost their positions, they had become a lesson, and Dr. Imani Jordan was now the teacher. The Global Wings Dignity and Excellence program was not the corporate retreat with trust falls and catered lunches that its pleasant name might suggest. It was a crucible, designed by Imani and implemented by a team of the toughest DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion consultants and operational psychologists in the country. The pilot program's classroom was a sterile, windowless conference room in a corporate building far from the airport, and for the first 2 weeks, its only students were Brenda Grisham and Robert Miller. Their first day was a shock. They walked in expecting a lecture, perhaps a stern HR reprimand. Instead, they were greeted by Dr. Alana Reed, a formidable woman with a PhD in organizational psychology who gestured for them to sit at a table. In the center of the table were 2 items, a stack of paper and a high-definition speaker. "Good morning," Dr. Reed said, her voice neutral. "Before we begin, we need to establish a baseline. We are going to listen to a recording." She pressed a button. The clear, amplified voice of Brenda Grisham filled the room. "Economy check-in is over there, ma'am." "Right. First class. The system's not finding a first-class booking for Imani Jordan." Brenda flinched as if struck. The recording was from the airport's overhead security microphones, audio that Imani's new security chief had pulled. It was crystal clear. Every condescending inflection, every disbelieving scoff, every dismissive grunt was captured perfectly. Then came Robert's voice, weak and placating. "I'm sure it's frustrating. Why don't we get you a voucher for a complimentary beverage for your troubles?" Robert sank lower in his chair, his face burning with shame. They were forced to listen to the entire 10-minute interaction, every humiliating second of it. When it was over, the silence in the room was deafening. "That," Dr. Reed said calmly, "was a single transaction that cost this company, according to preliminary analysis, upwards of $1.6 billion, not including brand damage. Your task for the next 3 days is to jointly author the report Dr. Jordan mentioned. Detail every procedural failure, every decision point, and every assumption made. Explain in your own words how your actions led directly to a hostile takeover of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Be specific." For 3 days, they were forced to collaborate, reliving their monumental failure in excruciating detail. The process was agonizing. Brenda, stripped of her authority, tried to blame the confusing system. Robert, stripped of his managerial title, tried to blame corporate policy. Dr. Reed dismantled their every excuse with cold, hard logic. Was the system confusing, Ms. Grisham, or did you reach a conclusion before you even scanned the ticket? Was it policy, Mr. Miller, to refuse to look at a customer's direct proof of purchase? Their defenses crumbled. For the first time, they were forced to confront the truth. They had acted on prejudice. Brenda had seen a black woman and assumed she didn't belong. Robert had seen a conflict and chosen the path of least resistance, which meant siding with his employee against the customer who didn't look the part. The second week was even more grueling. They were put through intense role-playing simulations. Actors, coached by the consulting team, played every type of difficult customer imaginable. But the twist was that Brenda and Robert were now the customers. They were put in situations where they were the ones being dismissed, ignored, and talked down to by actors playing officious employees. In one simulation, Brenda, playing a mother with a crying child, was told her ticket was invalid and was threatened with security. She broke down in tears of frustration and helplessness. In another, Robert, playing a non-native English speaker, was mocked for his accent and told to come back when you can speak clearly. He was left speechless with rage. The karma was insidious. It wasn't a punishment that could be endured and forgotten. It was a rewiring. They were being forced to feel the exact brand of humiliation they had so casually dispensed. The final part of their re-education was the most dreaded. They were assigned to the Global Wings baggage handling department at JFK for a month. Not as managers, but as entry-level handlers. They loaded and unloaded luggage in the freezing cold and the blistering heat. They saw the airline from the very bottom, the part that made the whole operation run. They saw the faces of the thousands of passengers they had only ever viewed as inconveniences on a screen. The physical labor was grueling, but the psychological toll was greater. Their former colleagues would see them on the tarmac, sorting bags, and would quickly look away. The story of what they had done had become a corporate legend, a cautionary tale told in break rooms and whispered in hallways. They weren't just Brenda and Robert anymore. They were the billion-dollar screw-up. Their names were synonymous with the ultimate professional failure. It was a slow, grinding, and deeply personal form of justice. Imani could have had them fired and forgotten in a day. Instead, she had made them living monuments to her new corporate philosophy. Dignity is not optional, and everyone, from the CEO to the customer at the check-in counter, is to be valued. For Brenda and Robert, every sore muscle, every averted gaze, every heavy suitcase was a reminder of the lesson they had refused to learn, a lesson now being taught to them in the hardest way imaginable. While Brenda and Robert were toiling in their bespoke purgatory, Imani Jordan was systematically dismantling and rebuilding Global Wings from the inside out. Her team from Nexus Innovations, a swarm of data analysts and efficiency experts, had descended upon the airline's archaic infrastructure. They discovered a company rotting from decades of complacency. But as they dug deeper, they found something far more sinister than mere incompetence. The catalyst was an anomaly in the data flagged by one of Imani's analysts. He noticed a statistically improbable number of last-minute, full-fare seat cancellations in first and business class, specifically on transatlantic routes out of JFK. These were often followed by last-minute cash sales for the same seats, transactions that were poorly documented and often reconciled manually. It smelled of fraud. Imani, suspecting the rot went deeper than just bad customer service, quietly hired a forensic accounting firm and a private investigations team headed by a former FBI agent named Michael Davies. Simultaneously, the high-profile nature of the takeover had attracted media attention. Kevin O'Malley, a tenacious investigative journalist from Forbes, was working on a feature story about Imani Jordan. He wasn't content with the official narrative of a slighted CEO getting revenge. He sensed there was more to the story of why Global Wings was such a vulnerable target. O'Malley started making calls, digging into the airline's operational history, and talking to disgruntled former employees. The two investigations, one internal and one external, began to unknowingly circle the same ugly truth. Michael Davies' team focused on Gate B24. They installed discreet surveillance and began analyzing the work patterns of the entire first-class check-in crew. They quickly realized that the system downgrade that Imani had experienced was not a random glitch. It was a recurring tactic. Their breakthrough came when they followed one of the counteragents after his shift. They watched him meet with a baggage handler in a nearby parking garage and exchange a thick envelope of cash. The pieces began to click into place. O'Malley, meanwhile, was getting tips from flight attendants and pilots who had long been suspicious of certain check-in crews. They spoke of passengers with confirmed premium seats being mysteriously bumped or downgraded at the last second, and of miraculously available seats being sold for cash to desperate travelers on the standby list. The money, they suspected, rarely made it into the company's coffers. The twist was this. Brenda Grisham wasn't just a prejudiced employee having a bad day. She was a key player in a lucrative, well-organized criminal conspiracy. She and a small ring of other senior agents, in collusion with a few baggage handlers and a manager in the revenue department, were running a sophisticated scam. They would target passengers they thought were less likely to complain or who fit a certain profile, sometimes non-native speakers, sometimes people who looked flustered or overwhelmed, and sometimes, as in Imani's case, people they profiled as not belonging. They would invent a system glitch, downgrade the legitimate passenger, and then sell the now empty premium seat to a standby passenger for thousands of dollars in cash. The revenue manager would then wipe the transaction from the central system, logging it as a complimentary upgrade for a high-status frequent flyer. The cash was split among the conspirators. It was a multi-million-dollar-a-year operation, hidden in the noise of a massive, inefficient airline. Imani's encounter with Brenda hadn't been a random act of racism. It had been a calculated business decision on Brenda's part. She had looked at Imani, a well-dressed black woman, traveling alone, and made a risk assessment. She gambled that Imani was an easy mark, someone who would either accept the downgrade meekly or who could be easily dismissed. It was a gamble she had won hundreds of times before. But this time, she had targeted a predator. The day the two investigations converged was explosive. Michael Davies presented his findings, video evidence, financial trails, and sworn testimony from a baggage handler who had flipped, to Imani in her new office. Less than an hour later, Kevin O'Malley from Forbes called Imani's PR director, laying out the entire scam and asking for a comment. Imani realized the story was about to break. She acted with lightning speed. She didn't just fire the people involved. She called the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York and the FBI. The hard karma that was about to hit Brenda Grisham and her accomplices would not be a month of hauling luggage. It would be federal charges of wire fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. When the FBI agents arrived at JFK the next day, it was a scene of chaos. They walked Brenda, who was just starting her shift in the baggage area, out in handcuffs. They arrested Robert Miller, not for his spinelessness, but because the investigation revealed he had known about the scam for months, taking small kickbacks to look the other way and handle any customer complaints that got too loud. His following procedure was actually him covering up a crime. The story exploded. It was no longer a tale of corporate revenge. It was a sprawling story of crime and corruption. Imani Jordan wasn't just a savvy CEO. She was a reformer who had, in the course of righting a personal wrong, uncovered and destroyed a criminal enterprise festering within her own new company. Her purchase of the airline was no longer seen as an act of ego, but as an act of justice. The fallout from the FBI raid was seismic. The arrests of Brenda Grisham, Robert Miller, and a dozen other Global Wings employees became national news. The Forbes article by Kevin O'Malley, titled "The Billion-Dollar Complaint That Uncovered a Criminal Conspiracy," went viral, painting a picture of Imani Jordan not as a vengeful tycoon, but as an accidental corporate crusader. The legal proceedings were swift. Faced with overwhelming evidence, most of the conspirators took plea deals. Brenda Grisham, identified as a ringleader, received a sentence of 4 years in federal prison. Robert Miller, for his role in the cover-up, received 18 months. They had gone from holding a sliver of power at an airport counter to being federal inmates, the ultimate life-altering karma for their prejudice and greed. For Imani, the scandal was the painful but necessary lancing of a wound. It gave her the mandate to enact radical change. She cleaned house, removing Arthur Finch and his entire C-suite, replacing them with a new, dynamic team of leaders from the tech and logistics industries. Her vision was to rebuild Global Wings from the ground up, not as an airline, but as a technology-driven travel experience company. Using Nexus Innovations' expertise, She implemented a revolutionary new booking and check-in system. It used biometric data, with passenger consent, and advanced AI to make the entire airport process seamless. The new system was fraud-proof, transparent, and eliminated the system glitches that had allowed the scam to flourish. She poured billions into refurbishing the airline's aging fleet, focusing on fuel efficiency and passenger comfort. She renegotiated union contracts, offering better pay and benefits in exchange for higher standards of service and accountability. The Dignity and Excellence program was rolled out company-wide, becoming the gold standard for customer service training in the industry. To symbolize the new era, she rebranded the airline's premium service. First class was renamed Jordan Class. It wasn't an act of ego, but a constant, visible reminder to every single employee of the company's new core principle. Every passenger is to be treated with the respect and dignity afforded to the owner herself. Within 2 years, the transformation was complete. The airline, once a Wall Street joke, was now a paragon of innovation and profitability. Its stock, which Imani had purchased at a bargain, had tripled in value. Customer satisfaction ratings were the highest in the industry. Global Wings, reborn under Imani's leadership, was soaring. The story became a legend, a modern-day business fable taught at Harvard Business School. It was a case study in corporate turnarounds, crisis management, and the staggering return on investment that comes from treating people with respect. One evening, about a year after the arrests, Imani was flying to London. She walked onto the plane and took her seat, Suite 1A in Jordan Class. The lead flight attendant, a veteran with over 20 years at the company, came to her seat. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Jordan," the attendant said, her voice filled with genuine warmth and admiration. "It is an absolute honor to have you on board. Can I get you anything before we take off?" Imani looked at the woman's sincere, smiling face. She saw the pride in her new uniform, the renewed energy in her eyes. She saw an employee who was proud of the company she worked for. In that moment, Imani realized her journey had come full circle. It had started with a demand for a seat she had paid for. It had ended with her providing thousands of people with careers they could be proud of, and a service the public could trust. The initial sting of humiliation at Gate B24 was now a distant memory, a tiny spark that had ignited a transforming fire. She had not just bought an airline counter. She had bought an opportunity to prove that the best business decisions are always rooted in basic human dignity. And as the plane ascended smoothly into the night sky, Dr. Imani Jordan, the woman they tried to put in a middle seat in economy, was flying higher than any of them could have ever imagined. And there you have it, a story that started with a moment of casual disrespect and ended with a complete corporate revolution. Dr. Imani Jordan's story is a powerful reminder that the person you underestimate today could be the one signing your paycheck or your indictment tomorrow. It wasn't just about the money or the power. It was about principle. It was a demonstration that prejudice isn't just morally wrong. It's bad for business. The karma that found Brenda and Robert wasn't just about losing their jobs. It was a complete dismantling of their world, a direct consequence of their own actions. If this story of ultimate karma and strategic genius captivated you, make sure to hit that like button and let us know in the comments, what would you have done in Imani's position? Share this video with someone who needs to see that the tables can always, always turn. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell for more incredible stories where justice is served, one boardroom at a time. Thanks for listening.